I'm Effie, and this video is going to be a rundown of all of the books that are on my Amazon wish list for this Christmas. Let me just start off by saying that I make this video every year, and it's not my intention to kind of expect people to buy me these books. It's just an excuse for me to take some time to go through a list of books that I really would quite like to read, but for whatever reason I haven't bought myself a copy. I'm doing things a little bit differently this year, as I've actually got two wish lists. The first of which is books that I haven't read and want to and don't own. That makes sense. That's what a wish list usually is. And then the second list is books that I have read and loved, and for whatever reason I don't own a physical copy of, but I want to. So in order to do this, I'm going to share my screen with you and just kind of walk you through my Amazon wish lists. For the books that I haven't read yet, I'll just be reading out the synopses given on screen on Amazon, and then for the books that I have read, I'll probably say a little bit about the books, but probably won't be reading the on-screen synopses. Hope this all makes sense. Let's just get into it. So first up on my list, we've got the Parable series by Octavia E. Butler. Oh! Oops! Oh, oops! Okay! Okay then, let's move on from that, I suppose. Oh gosh, am I gonna end up spoiling like my Christmas? I really hope not. Oh no! Oh, oh no! Oh! Oh, thank you, Amazon. Oh gosh. Okay, so we've got the complete Sucky Stackhouse stories by Charlaine Harris. For the first time together in one volume, the complete Sucky Stackhouse short stories with new introductions from Charlaine Harris. New fans can fill in the gaps in their Sucky lore, while old friends can revisit some of their favourite moments and characters, from investigating the murder of a local fairy to learning that her cousin was a vampire, from remodelling Tara's house to attending a wedding with her shape-shifting boss, Sam. Sucky navigates the perils and pitfalls of the paranormal world. Gather round the bar at Bonhomp's favourite watering hole and hear stories that will make you wish that Sucky never left. So this is on my wish list because I do have plans to do a full reread of the series, but I don't think I've ever actually read these short stories, so I'm quite excited to add in additional bits to the series when I do my full reread. Sorcery and Small Magics by Major Ducey. Desperate to undo the curse binding them together, an impulsive sorcerer and his curmudgeonly rival venture deep into a magical forest in search of a counterspell, only to discover that magic might not be the only thing pulling them together. Leo Vanilovich is a master of small magics, content to spend his days thinking up charms that can summon butterflies or turn hair pink. That is, until a mishap with forbidden magic compels Liam to obey his longtime rival, Sebastian Grimm. Grimm is Leo's complete opposite, respected, talented, and an absolutely insufferable curmudgeon. They need a counterspell, and fast. Chasing rumours of a powerful sorcerer, Leo and Grimm enter the Unquiet Wood, a forest teeming with murderous monsters and dangerous outlaws. To break the curse, they'll have to uncover the true depths of Leo's magic set aside their animosity and, much to their horror, work together, even as an odd spark of attraction flares between them. So this sounds cozy, but the kind of cozy I can get on board with, especially because the comp titles are A Marvelous Light and Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which, if it's like that, I'm so on board for. Bright Sword by Lev Grossman. When gifted young knight Colum arrives at Camelot to compete for a place on the Round Table, he quickly discovers that he's too late. The king died 2 weeks ago at the Battle of Camlan, and only a handful of the knights of the Round Table are left. And the survivors aren't the heroes of legend either, like Lancelot or Gawain. They're the oddballs of the Round Table, like Sir Polydamas, the Saracen knight, and Sir Dagonet, Arthur's fool, who was knighted as a joke. They're joined by Nimue, who was Merlin's apprentice, until she turned on him and buried him under a hill. But it's up to them to rebuild Camelot in a world that has lost its balance, even as God abandons Britain and the fairies and old gods are returning, led by Morgan Le Fay. They must reclaim Excalibur and make this ruined world whole again. But first they'll have to solve the mystery of why the lonely, brilliant King Arthur fell. So I feel like when you're British, you kind of grow up with Arthurian legend. So even though I've never read like an Arthurian legend, I feel like it's a story I know really well. And one of my all-time favorite series is a contemporary reimagining of the Legend of King Arthur, and that is the New Camelot series by Sierra Simone. So I'm really intrigued to read this, and I like the idea of it being kind of this band of misfits that are sort of leftovers after all the real heroes are gone. A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Liang. Oh, this one doesn't have much in the way of a blurb. It says, inspired by Chinese mythology, she who became the sun meets Daughter of the Moon Goddess in this sweeping adult historical epic with a love story for the ages. That's really helpful. But I will say this is on my list because I've heard that it is completely and utterly heartbreaking. And that is just the brand of story that I love to read. So scrolly. Black History for Every Day of the Year by David Olusoga, Yinka Olusoga, and Kemi Olusoga. Change everything you thought you knew about history and the people who have shaped it. Black History for Every Day of the Year by historian and broadcaster David Olusoga and his siblings Yinka and Kemi tells the far-reaching story of Black history. Discover something new every day in this brilliant gift for readers of all ages. Did you know that Aretha Franklin was the first woman to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and that a black woman discovered the cure for leprosy? Or did you know that the first accounts of a black samurai in Japan date back almost 500 years? Packed with quotes, poems, illustrations, and pictures, Black History for Every Day of the Year gives you new insights about well-known figures and inspirational unsung heroes. With stories of hope, connection, and creativity, alongside tales of racism, resistance, and celebration. From the 19th century anti-slavery movement to World Wars I and II, to the Harlem Renaissance, Stormzy, Simone Biles, and beyond. So I saw an author whose name completely escapes me, but her book is Hot Tub Time Travelers, I think. And she was talking about this book on TikTok, and it just sounded so good. I think it's also one of these books that like physically is really beautiful, and I like the idea of these presumably quite bite-sized pieces of information that you can just dip in and out of and like continue learning. Necrology by Meg Ripley. It's amazing what the spirit can cope with to preserve the body. My spirit is a mighty oak that just won't fall. In a fantastical aftermath of the Salem witch trials, magical women, known as the Dirty, have signed a contract swearing off their innate magic in exchange for freedom from violence by non-magical freemen. 200 years later, in a Catskill orphanage, Headmistress Whitetail has sprouted antlers, proof of a violated contract. When her wealthy benefactor visits proposing marriage, her appearance sparks abuse. Rushing to her teacher's defense, 8-year-old Rabbit curses the beard dead, and Whitetail's arrested on trumped-up charges. As Whitetail awaits her trial and execution, Rabbit is groomed as the freeman's star witness and learns of the terrifying reality to which they aspire. With her magic at stake and a loose tooth in her mouth, Rabbit has little left to lose and a revolution to gain. So I like the fact that this sounds like the kind of book that is simultaneously full of feminine rage and also a little bit weird. Let's see what's next up. I don't think my wish list is super long, but maybe I'm wrong. The Last Immortal by Natalie Gibson. I am Lady Ramilla Winmore, daughter of the very late Earl of Bruxbury, or I was lifetimes ago. I am an immortal, and this is my story. Do what you will with it, but I must warn you, this tale is not for the faint of heart. High-born Victorian lady that I was, my life was one of violence and cruelty. Lady Ramilla Winmore has suffered gaps in her memory her entire life. This darkness has proven to be a blessing until the day she awakens strapped to an examination table at the West Freeman Asylum for Lunatics. Imprisoned for the gruesome murder of her parents, she is forced to endure years of torture until salvation arrives in the form of a benefactor named Sir Julian Lawrence. Betrothed to her through an arranged marriage, Julian helps her gain freedom. But appearances are deceiving, and soon Ramilla learns the cost she must pay. The horrors she encounters in his household are far worse than the asylum. When he inducts her into a society of bloodthirsty, cruel immortals, she is forced to join them and accept their way of life. Armed with talents she doesn't know she has, Ramilla must break free of a prison she cannot see, kill an enemy who cannot die, and find a daughter she cannot remember, all with the help of an ally she does not know. In this chilling Gaslight era gothic horror novel where paranormal powers are bred and collected, friends and foes are not always what they seem when immortality is at stake. So essentially, vampire book. I'm very rarely going to turn my nose up at a vampire book, and this one sounds particularly good and particularly intriguing to me. And we've got a couple more vampire books. In fact, I don't know how many more vampire books. We've got a lot. So we've got Fang Fiction, which it says... Oh yeah, I remember. This is the one where a woman ends up inside a vampire romance, I'm pretty sure. She's out for adventure, he's out for blood. The world of your favourite fantasy novels is real, and you're invited to visit. The only catch, it's filled with thirsty vampires. Tess Rosenblum is no stranger to the dark. A grad school dropout and chronic insomniac, she spends her nights managing a chic Brooklyn hotel and her days curled up with her favourite vampire novels, Blood Feud. Tess even dabbles in online conspiracies that Blood Feud is real. It's fun to hunt for clues, but deep down, Tess doesn't believe vampires actually exist until one walks through her door. It turns out Blood Feud is real and the sexy villain of the novels is trapped. Eager to escape her life, Tess agrees to help rescue him, and soon she's in a fantasia of lavish palaces and enchanted forests on a secret island where the sun never shines and she's surrounded by deadly vampires. And against her better judgment, she's falling in love with one of them. And unbeknownst to Tess, her estranged best friend is having a sapphic affair with a beautiful vampire of her own back in New York. Visiting the world of your favourite story is any fan's dream, but will Tess be able to outrun the demons of her past and vampires of her present before it becomes a nightmare? In this darkly glamorous rom-com, Tess will find out whether it's worth risking her neck and her heart for a chance to reclaim her future. So I will say that this is a book that honestly could go either way for me, but I do like the idea of her being thrust into a world that she thought was a fantasy. And there's also potentially the fact that it's a world she's familiar with because she's a fan of it. But hopefully at some point I'll get a chance to read it. Is this one going to let me click through, or is it going to come up with a notification? Oh, it is! Okay. Oh, it's book 2, that's why. So, Blood on the Tide by Katie Robert. Set sail for adventure and love in the next spicy fantasy romance from Katie Robert. As a bloodline vampire, Lizzie has never had a problem taking what she wants. And right now, what she wants are the family heirlooms that were stolen from her, a ship and a portal home. Unfortunately, even that short list is impossible to accomplish on her own, and her allies have bigger things to worry about. When they rescue a Selkie, it's the perfect solution to her problems. Lizzie needs a guide through Threshold, and the Selkie needs her skin back. Maeve didn't choose to give up her skin, it was stolen from her. Now she's in an uneasy partnership with a dangerous woman who seems more apt to kill than to share a kind word. It's terrifying and a bit alluring. Even though she knows it will end in heartbreak, Maeve can't help being drawn to Lizzie. Unfortunately, the danger to Maeve's heart is the least of her worries. The ship they're seeking belongs to Quinn Anwin, and they don't take kindly to people who cross them. They're coming hunting, and not even Lizzie's viciousness or Maeve's knowledge will be enough to save them. So this one stood out to me because vampires plus Selkie, you've got 2 out of 3 of my faves. Yeah, yes please. Just scrolling down. Okay, well I can see another vampire book. I don't think To You Shall All Flesh Come is a oh no, it is a vampire book. Okay, by Lumen Reese. A brilliant chief of surgery and his team ensnare vampires, harvest their organs to donate or sell on the black market, then tag them like sharks and release them back into the wild. Encased within the pace taker, attached to the heart, are a toothpick and a monitor of levels of human blood in the vampire system. Their levels rise too high and they get death by toothpick. It's a barbaric new method to keep vampires docile. Apparently, they've been on the honor system this whole time. So, I think this is a horror, which surprisingly, for the amount of vampire books I read, I don't feel like a lot of them are horror. So it appeals to me on that front, that is a little bit horrific. It also sounds like it's not going to take itself too seriously, which I'm also a big fan of in books. And then there's definitely at least one more vampire book, because We Love the Nightlife by Rachel Kohler Croft is a vampire book. So London 1979. 2 women with a deep love for disco meet one fateful night on the dance floor, changing the course of both their lives forever. Nicola, a beautiful and brooding vampire for nearly 2 centuries, can't resist fun-loving and feisty Amber from America, ultimately offering an eternity together where the glamour of nightlife always takes center stage. But not all is what it seems. Nearly 50 years later, after an unexpected betrayal, Amber wants out from under Nicola's thumb, but it won't be as simple to break up this festering friendship when she learns others have done the same and wound up dead. Sensing Amber's restlessness, and in one last play to keep her close, Nicola proposes they open a nightclub of their very own, harkening back to their best days as dancing queens. Amber agrees, but she's secretly hatching a dangerous escape plan, and if she fails, the party is over for good. So what appeals to me about this is it seems to be hinging on toxic friendships, which is such a fun theme in books. And the fact that the toxic friendship is paired with vampires is always a shout to me. Okay, I'm gonna skip someone you can build a nest in because it's currently 99p on Kindle and I just haven't bought it yet, but I plan on buying it on Kindle, so like I'm gonna own it by the time this video goes up, most likely. American Ghoul by Michelle McGill Vargas. It's another vampire book. Oh, I've got so many vampire books on my list. Like, not all of them, which is unusual for me, but there are the majority of vampire books. A wildly entertaining debut from Michelle McGill Vargas, American Ghoul deftly combines horror and social commentary with a dash of buddy comedy in an innovative twist on the vampire genre. You can't kill someone who's already dead. That's what Lavinia keeps telling her jailer after allegedly killing her mistress, Simone Orenso. But how could Simone be dead when she was taking callers just a few minutes before? And why was her house always so dark? Lavinia, a recently freed slave, met Simone, a recently undead vampire, by chance on a plantation in post-Civil War Georgia. With nothing remaining for either woman in the South, the two form a fast friendship and head north. However, Lavinia quickly learns that teaming up with this white woman may be more than she bargained for. Simone is reckless and impulsive, which would have been bad enough on its own, but when combined with her particular diet, Lavinia finds herself in way over her head. As she is forced to repeatedly compromise her morals and struggles to make lasting human connections, Lavinia begins to wonder, is she truly free, or has she merely exchanged one form of enslavement for another? As bodies start to pile up in the small Indiana town they've settled in, people start to take a second look at the two newcomers, and Simone and Lavinia's relationship is stretched to breaking point. So I think the blurb on that speaks for itself about like why it's appealing. You know, it reminds me a little bit of the Gilda stories, but if the Gilda stories had a little bit more of like Gilda's life before she became Gilda. Marriage to Kitsune Sama. Every few decades, the town of Hokucho sends a human up the mountain to marry one of the fox spirits who reside above them, and Inaho has always longed for that role. When he comes of age, he ascends to his new home and meets his handsome new husband, a Kitsune lord named Subaru. Subaru has been watching Inaho for a long time and is pleased to receive his new spouse. But before this supernatural marriage can enter its honeymoon stage, Inaho learns that Subaru is stuck with an unfortunate curse. This fox spirit wants to eat up his beloved, literally. Can Inaho and Subaru find a way to break the curse and save their relationship? So this would be the third of my favourite fantasy characters. So we've got vampires, Selkies, and Kitsune, or fox spirits. I'm not picky when it comes to fox spirits, but like I generally will say Kitsune or fox spirit, but I know there are a variety of different ones, just like there are a variety of vampires, really. Through the Night Like a Snake by Monica Ojedo. Ojeda? A boy explores the abandoned house of a dead fascist. Elite sex tape pushes a woman to the brink. A sex worker discovers a dark secret among the nuns of the Pampas. A mountain fog is not what it seems. Kermit the Frog dreams of murder. So that alone is what intrigued me and made me want to add this to my list. I'm pretty sure I saw someone on one of the Discords I'm part of also say that, like, mention this collection of short stories. Like, I don't normally read a lot of short stories, or at least, like, I don't reach for them, but these all sound incredibly intriguing and I would like to give it a go. The Scottish Boy by Alex de Campi. I hate it when it's like a block of text. 1333. Edward III is at war with Scotland. 19-year-old Sir Harry de Leon yearns to prove himself and jumps at the chance when a powerful English baron, William Montague, invites him on a secret mission with a dozen elite knights. They ride north to a crumbling Scottish keep, capturing the feral half-starved boy within and putting the other inhabitants to the sword. But nobody knows why the flower of English knighthood snuck over the border to capture a savage, dirty teenage boy. Montague gives the boy to Harry as his squire, with only two rules: don't let him escape and convert him to the English cause. At first it's hopeless. The Scottish boy is surly and violent and eats anything that isn't nailed down. Then Harry begins to notice things, that, as well as Gaelic, the boy speaks flawless French with an accent much different from Harry's Norman one, that he can read Latin too, and when Harry finally convinces the boy, Ian McMailcolm, to cut his filthy curtain of hair, the face revealed is the most beautiful thing Harry has ever seen. With Ian as his squire, Harry wins tournament after tournament and becomes a favourite of the king. But underneath the pageantry smoulder twin secrets: Harry and Ian's growing passion for each other and Ian's mysterious heritage. As England hurtles towards war once again, these secrets will destroy everything Harry holds dear. It sounds good, doesn't it? It sounds a little bit outlandery, but if they weren't from different periods of time, which I guess is not massively outlandery, except for Cough Drops by Eric Dakota. This is one that I've heard is also quite heartbreaking. High school hallways hide deeper secrets than locker combinations. Corey, average 15-year-old, maybe before he realized butterflies erupt for guys, not girls. Now confessing to his best friend Brian feels like stepping off a cliff, but amidst the confusion he finds an unexpected anchor in a kindred spirit who speaks the language of hidden hearts. Brian, scoring goals is easier than navigating life's sudden curveballs. His carefully controlled world spins wildly, leaving him scrambling for his footing. When tragedy strikes, Brian cracks, revealing vulnerabilities he desperately tries to deal with. Travis, new kid, mid-year. The whispers follow him like shadows. Why the move? Where'd you come from? He longs to disappear, but as he carves his way through unfamiliar faces, he stumbles upon friendships as warm as stolen sunshine. Together they dive into a world where families shift like tectonic plates, love blooms in unexpected corners, and self-discovery hurts like growing pains. In a landscape painted with loss, first kisses, and whispered truths, they grapple with the messy, exhilarating chaos of finding themselves in a world obsessed with fitting in. So yeah, as I say, I had heard that this is absolutely heartbreaking. Although this cover slightly giving me the ick. I could be wrong, but that cover looks like it is not human generated. I'm particularly concerned about the hands, but there is a certain weirdness to the faces. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you think this is human generated or if an actual person was involved. I don't know. Obviously, like, if it's an AI cover, that's immediately a nope for me. The Dangerous Kingdom of Love by Neil Blackmore. Francis Bacon, philosopher, politician, writer, is an outsider at the court of King James I. He is clever but not aristocratic, has ambition but no money. So when his political enemies form a deadly alliance against him, centered around the king's poisonous lover, Robert Carr, Bacon has no choice but to fight for his survival. Together with the neglected queen, Bacon resolves to find a beguiling young man who can supplant Carr in the king's bed. But as Bacon soon discovers, desire is not something that can be controlled. Bold, irreverent, and utterly original, The Dangerous Kingdom of Love is a darkly witty satire about power and a moving queer love story that resonates through time. I basically heard that this is utterly fantastic. I think it's incredibly loosely based on real events, but yeah, just absolutely fantastically written from what I've heard, and doesn't have an AI cover because just too much AI. Okay, the rest of the books have featured on previous wishlist videos, but I'll still quickly go through them. So we've got Vampires, Burial and Death, Folklore and Reality by Paul Barber. This is a non-fiction exploring various different vampire mythoses, and growing up my dad has always spoken about how good this particular book is, but he has lost his copy of, as things do when you move around. So I've never actually had a chance to read it, and I am desperate to do so. And The Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagech. When Scylla and Norrie arrive at their aunt's home, it's immediately clear that the Blood Manor is cursed. The creaking of the house and the stillness of the woods surrounding them would be enough of a sign, but there are secrets too, the questions that Scylla can't ignore. Who is the beautiful boy that's appeared from the woods? Who is the man that her little sister sees but no one else? And why does it seem that ever since they arrived, the trees have been creeping closer? I've heard this is an incredible horror novel, like really creepy. Then we've got Queen of the Cicadas by V. Castro. 2018, Belinda Alvarez has returned to Texas for the wedding of her best friend Veronica. The farm is the site of the urban legend La Reina de las Chicaras, the Queen of the Cicadas. In 1950s South Texas, a farm worker, Milagro from San Luis Potosi, Mexico, is murdered. Her death is ignored by the town, but not the Aztec goddess of death, Mitachuel. Every time I read this blurb, I struggle. I really should actually find out how it's pronounced. I wonder if I can get Google to do it for me. It's probably, I'm probably adding too many consonants. Mictecasiwa. I'm not very good at reading, phonetics. Okay, let's quickly play this YouTube video. Okay, so the Aztec goddess of death, Mictecasihuatl. The goddess hears the dying cries of Milagro and creates a plan for both to be physically reborn by feeding on vengeance and worship. Belinda and the new owner of the farmhouse, Hector, find themselves immersed in the legend and realize it is part of their fate as well. So I love stories that center vengeance, and it just sounds so creepy. And to have a story from the global south as well. Yeah, all of that sounds very much my cup of tea. Lead Me Astray by Sondi Warner. Welcome to Overlay City in New Orleans, a shadowy in-between where the paranormal and the real world meet. Its newest resident, Ori Edison, a victim of a hit and run, Ori now exists as a ghost in this mysterious realm. Convinced there's more to her death than what she remembers, Ori sets out to uncover the truth. She soon finds herself in the company of mice a psychic empath whose need to help others trumps all else, and Zaya, a werewolf detective able to work both the human and the occult worlds. As they begin to piece together the events leading up to her death, Ori can't deny the deeper connection developing between them. Yet, with each new secret suggesting a more sinister danger at play, they realize that they may not make it out dead or alive. Undeniably queer and devilishly sexy, Lead Me Astray will take you to the shadowy depths of New Orleans and never let you go. So the big selling point for me is that it's like life and death and the supernatural elements, I guess. Also, that it's undeniably queer. Just lots of good things for me, I think. Forgive Me Not by Jennifer Baker. In this searing indictment of the juvenile justice system, one teen in detention weighs what she is willing to endure for forgiveness. All it took was one night and one bad decision for 15-year-old Violetta Chen Samuels' life to go off the rails. After driving drunk and causing the accident that kills her little sister, Violetta is incarcerated. Under the juvenile justice system, her fate lies in the hands of those she wronged, her family. With their forgiveness, she could go home, but without it, well, denied their forgiveness, Violetta is now left with two options, neither good: remain in juvenile detention for an uncertain sentence, or participate in the trials. The trials are no easy feat, but if she succeeds, she could regain both her freedom and what she wants most of all, her family's love. In her quest to prove her remorse, Violetta is forced to confront not only her family's grief, but her own, and the question of whether their forgiveness is more important than forgiving herself. So I like the fact that this seems to be quite a complex narrative. In addition to that, one of my favourite books that I've ever read is At the End of Everything, which is a pandemic story, but it's also very much an indictment of the justice system and the way that it isn't justice and it's absolute garbage. Angels Before Men by Raphael Nicola, a queer retelling of Satan's fall. In an eternal paradise, the most beautiful angel, Lucifer, struggles with shame, identity, and timidity, with little more than the desire to worship his creator. It isn't until the strongest angel, Michael, comes into his life that Lucifer learns to love himself. Along the way, their friendship begins to bloom into something else, maybe the first romance in the history of everything. But this God is a jealous one, and maybe paradise is not paradise. I love this kind of genre of books that's kind of Bible slash and queering things up. It tickles something for me. I'm not going to bother clicking through on the tarot book, but Tarot No Questions Asked by Teresa Reed. It's just a guidebook to learning to intuitively read tarot, which is something that I want to do. We've got another edition of Vampires, Burial and Death, and then My Soul to Keep and Better Off Red are the last two books on this list. So My Soul to Keep is by Tananarive Jew, and it is the first book in the African Immortal series. When Jessica marries David, he is everything she wants in a family man: brilliant, attentive, ever youthful. Yet she still feels something about him is just out of reach. Soon as people close to Jessica begin to meet violent, mysterious deaths, David makes an unimaginable confession. More than 400 years ago, he and other members of an Ethiopian sect traded their humanity so they would never die, a secret he must protect at any cost. Now his immortal brethren have decided David must return and leave his family in Miami. Instead, David vows to invoke a forbidden ritual to keep Jessica and his daughter with him forever. Harrowing, engrossing, and skillfully rendered, My Soul to Keep traps Jessica between the desperation of immortals who want to rob her of her life and a husband who wants to rob her of her soul. With deft plotting and an unforgettable climax, this tour de force that Stephen King called an eerie epic is sure to win due a legion of new fans. So, little bit of a different take on vampires. Or at least from my perspective, it feels like a little bit of a different take. Better Off Red, which is book 1 in the Vampire Sorority Sisters series by Rebecca Weatherspoon. Every sorority has its secret, and college freshman Ginger Carmichael couldn't care less. She has more important things on her mind, like maintaining her perfect GPA. No matter how much she can't stand the idea of the cliques and the matching colours, there's something about the girls of Alpha Beta Omega, their beauty, confidence, and unapologetic sexuality that draws Ginger in. But once initiation begins, Ginger finds that her pledge is more than a bond of sisterhood. It's a lifelong pact to serve 6 bloodthirsty demons with a lot more than nutritional needs. Despite her fears, Ginger falls hard for the immortal queen of this nest, and as the semester draws to a close, she sees that protecting her family from the secret of her forbidden love is much harder than studying for finals. So Rebecca Weatherspoon is an author that I think I read from once before, and I had a really good time. And then we've got this book that's by a BIPOC author, and reading through the blurb, it seems to be sapphic, so it ticks a lot of boxes for, things that are going to really work for me. And that ends the list of books that I haven't read that are on my wish list. Now let's go through my trophy cabinet wish list. So at the top of the list, we've got 3 books by David R. Slayton, and they are the Adam Binder books. They are random editions because it's just what's available on the UK Amazon. But we've got White Trash Warlock, Trailer Park Trickster, and Deadbeat Druid. And these are urban fantasy, I think it's called. You've got this man that gets thrust into this world of magic. There's royal houses that are based around tarot. It's very intriguing, very engrossing, and overall I've just had the very best time reading it. And having recently read Rogue Community College, which is like a spin-off, it's set in the same world and you have a couple of familiar characters popping up, but it's not a direct continuation of the Adam Binder novels. It's just made me want to return to the original Adam Binder books and just devour them all over again. And we've got By the Pint by Gemma Croft. This one took me really by surprise. It's a vampire human romance, and it's book 3 in the Fantasy Flatmates series, but they can all be read independent of one another. And we've got this sunshiny... Is he sunshiny? Yeah, the vampire's like this sunshiny ball of joy, but like he's been through some stuff in his life, but he's still just this cute little ball of joy. And then the human is this like grumpy sports ball, like it's literally called wing ball, this grumpy ex sports ball player that all his life he's wanted to become a vampire, and the two of them start catching feelings. The catch is, if the ex sports player becomes a vampire, he will lose all of his memories, and obviously that is devastating for them. It's so romantic. It's also does not take itself too seriously at all. It had me cracking up at multiple times as I was reading it, and I loved it so much. The Crack at the Heart of Everything by Fiona Fan is an MM romance where an evil sorcerer accidentally ends up with a curse that means that every hell beast is coming after him and trying to kill him. So he ends up exiled from the only home he's ever known, and this kind of sunshiny soldier guard takes it upon himself to accompany this sorcerer and take care of him. And oh, it's so sweet, but it's also got like a really good emotional core to it. Where the veil is thin is, I think there's one other anthology on this wish list. Like, it's the rare time where an anthology works for me, but this really worked for me. So this is all kind of fantasy. Oh gosh, it feels like, you know, like local fantasy tales like Tamlin and like the the Selkie Bride. I'm trying to think. You know those like apparently I just folklore. It feels more folklorish, and I think almost all of the stories in this book were a hit for me, and I just want to own it physically. Home Fire is a retelling of Antigone set in the modern world, and it is expertly executed and just as harrowing as the original story of Antigone. This is where it ends. I believe it involves a school shooter, but beyond that, I don't remember much of it. But I know that I love Marika Nishkamp's writing, so I want to own a copy of this. I want to be able to reread it and just kind of fall in love with the story all over again. 10 Things That Never Happened by Alexis Hall. It's so like, it's like a kind of silly concept, but it really works. Basically, you've got this guy who is called up to the flagship store for the bed and bath company that he works for, and the boss starts having a go at him, being like, you need to be upselling, you need to be more proactive, you need to like improve. And then this the guy that's not the boss ends up like tripping, having a bit of an accident, and there's a little bit of like a miscommunication that leads to the boss thinking that the not boss has amnesia, and the not boss character uses it to is his advantage to try and save his store. And then they fall in love, and it's a Christmassy story, but like not an in your face Christmassy story, but it is taking place in the latter half of the year. And the boss guy, his family's like very much like, we want to do Christmas, like we want to spend time with you. And the not boss character, you know, is carrying some hidden pain. And when the background to that got revealed, it got me like a gut punch. Like, I think it was one of these where like you had hints throughout the story, but it still hurt. Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll is very, very loosely based, or at least I think it's very, I'm not actually that familiar with the case, on Ted Bundy, except it takes all the power away from Ted Bundy and gives it to the women. It's not an easy read. It's not an easy read, especially because it takes place in dual timeline. You've got three main characters. So you've got three perspectives. You've got this survivor in present and past, and then you've got past of this woman going missing, and your heart is in your throat because you know that she's interacting with the character known only as the defendant, and you're really hoping that nothing bad happens, but she's been missing for a while. Beautiful, but also so heartbreaking. Taproot is a very cute story, As it says, it's a story about a gardener and a ghost. It's a graphic novel, and it's just a cozy, gentle kind of story. Same for A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. I absolutely loved A Song for the Wild Bill, and I also absolutely loved A Prayer for the Crown Shy. But it's very hard for me to give myself permission to spend that kind of money on a hardback that's only that thick. Same for the Wayward Children novels. Like, I would not own the Wayward Children novels. I think I'm still missing the most recent one that came out in 2024, but the only reason I own them is because my incredibly beautifully hearted best friend bought me all of the Wayward Children novels that had been released at the point that she got them for me. But I know I loved both books in the Monk and Robot series, and I own Song for the Wild Bill, so I just need to give myself permission to buy A Prayer for the Crown Shy. Godly Heathens by H.E. Edgemont is so well done. You've got this non-binary teenager who finds out that he's actually the reincarnation of a god, and then you've got this whole pantheon of gods, and they've all got very intriguing personalities. So this character's starting to come to terms with, okay, maybe this is why I don't feel like I belong. It's so good, but apparently all thought has left my brain right now. Your Wish is My Command by Diana Mohammed is another graphic novel. This one centers around a seller in Egypt who has 3 first-class wishes to sell, but people are very reticent to buy those wishes. They're also quite expensive. So think about genies kind of thing, but instead of a genie granting the wishes, it's wishes that are in bottles and they're one use only, and you've got different classifications of wishes. So you've got first class that can do incredible things but are incredibly expensive, and they're also saved for the top classes of society. But beyond the fact that the stories are fantastic, they interlink, there's some real power behind each of the stories that are being told around the wishes. Attention has been taken to criticize colonialism essentially in this story, because one of the core things is the idea that you've got countries that are wish rich but are mined by wish factory countries. So even though those countries don't have the wishes native to them, they are mining the wishes from other countries. Absolutely fascinating. And I think this was my favourite graphic novel that I read when I was reading for the Hugo Awards this year, which says something, because the most recent, at the start of the year, volume of Saga was in it, and yet I still picked Your Wish is My Command over that volume of Saga. Honey by Isabel Banter. I feel like this book has not been sold in a way that does it justice, because this is a story about a young woman trying to survive in the music industry, and guys being creeps to her, and she's criticized for falling in love. And it's so searing the way that it criticizes all of these things. I also think that Banter's done an incredible job of capturing this girl's voice, in that she genuinely feels more mature as she goes on in the book, as she is, actually getting older. And then the ending, utterly gorgeous. How to Bite Your Neighbour and Win a Wager, by Deanne Brun. I had to have a vampire book on this list, and it is an utterly fantastic vampire book. Waiting for the Flood is book 2 in the Spires series by Alexis Hall. It's quite a gentle story, so it's kind of split into two. So it's kind of two stories in one. So each of the stories are following a different man who were together but have broken up. And in the first one, it's just, this man preparing for a flood that's about to hit the place that he lives. And then in the second story, the man has, I think, twisted his ankle and ends up having to stay with this guy who lives on a canal boat. They are gentle, fun romances. And I love the way Alexis Hall writes. The Fireborn Blade and The Bloodless Princes, I think it's a duology, but I wouldn't be mad if there was more books in this series by Charlotte Bond. So I think what works for me about these books is that Bond has taken a lot of time to build out the lore of this world. And also the fact that it's a sapphic story at the core of it. And dragons! So many dragons! And they've all got interesting personalities. I can't do this series justice. But just take my word for it. It is actually so good. So good. Killing Eve box set. I mean, I feel like most people know what Killing Eve is, but these books are so much better than the TV show. I don't know if I even made it through 2 seasons of the TV show, but I have no interest in continuing it because they absolutely botched the ending to the point that Luke Jennings, the author, had to say in newspaper articles, this is not the ending that I intended. This is not the story I wrote. If you want a satisfying ending, go read the book, because I actually wrote a good ending. In Faust by T.D. Cloud, it's hate to hate. It's a romance where at no point do these characters really like each other, but they are together, and they are one of them. So it's Pied Piper and a witch who's lost his familiar. And basically the Pied Piper is an absolute jerk, and jerk is putting it lightly. He is a homicidal, unhinged maniac, but you can't help but love him, which I don't know what that says about me, but I had a good time with it. We've got books 1 and 2 in the Lunetti Pack series by Mel H's. This series centers around a pack of wolves who live in a city where each of the supernatural creatures controls a particular aspect of crime. So the wolves, which is what the Lunetti Pack are, control arms. The witches are a motorcycle club and they control drugs, and the vampires are a coven and they control trafficking. So in His Mate by Vengeance, it is a vampire werewolf romance, and in His Mate by Resistance, it's a witch werewolf romance, and both of them are so good. I can't wait for the next book, even though I think it's going to be about another year until we get it, but I will gladly reread these books until then. A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow. So I don't know. Wait, why have I only got book 1? I'm guessing book 2 is elsewhere on this list, because we've got A Spindle Splintered and A Mirror Mended are the books in the Fractured Fable series, and if I'm honest, I can't decide if I want the books individually as hardbacks or if I want the bind up of the two in paperback, because I don't massively love either of the covers. But in A Spindle Splintered, Harrow takes a look at the different ways that the Sleeping Beauty mythology has been interpreted throughout time and various cultures, and then in A Mirror Mending the same treatment is given to Snow White. These are fiction, but they are also very incisive and intriguing. And I think there is like a queer romance in A Spindle Splintered, but a lot more you see this sapphic romance in A Mirror Mended, and like the evil queen is the love interest, and I'm very, very much here for that. Mother Maiden Crone is an anthology of trans feminine stories, and apparently I have no words, but it is an incredible anthology of stories. The annoying thing is, it's really hard to track down a copy, but as soon as I can get a copy, I probably will. The Summer That Melted Everything by Tiffany McDaniel. So I've read 2 out of 3 of McDaniel's books, and they were so good. So The Summer That Melted Everything is about a young boy that comes into town that I can't remember if he says he's the devil or if the town decides he's the devil, but there's a lot of ostracization going on. And then at the same time, you've got our main character who is in the present and reflecting on when he was a boy and when this young lad who was the devil came into town. And the thing that really stands out for me is there's this absolutely gorgeous story about our main character falling in love in adulthood in more recent years, but also it is, a kind of dark, chilling story. But then that's what McDaniel does really well. She writes hard-hitting, dark stories that are unapologetic in what they're saying. There's A Mirror Mended. So Peter Darling by Austin Chant is a Peter Pan reimagining where Peter Pan is actually a trans man. And okay, I'm gonna have to dead name him just because that's the only way I can explain the plot. Basically, Wendy Darling and Peter Pan are the same person, but Peter Pan is who the person that was Wendy truly is. And there's also a bit of a romance between Peter and Hook, which, that's not an uncommon pairing. And it's just, a fun little read. A Dirty Business and A Cruel Arrangement by Chijan are mafia romances. There's something just only in fiction. In real life, cinnamon rolls or nothing, but there's something so delicious about a very violent, very criminal man in fiction, and these don't shy away from the very criminal aspects of these characters' lives. They follow 2 different couples, but the couple from the first book you see pop up in the second book, and it's kind of dealing with everything that happened in the first book and the lasting ramifications. You can see there we've got The Only Wayward Children novel that I don't own yet, Mislaid in Parts Half Known. But obviously in February, when the physical edition of the next Wayward Children comes out, there'll be 2 Wayward Children books that I don't own. But, Sean Maguire does not miss with this series. I do think it's somewhat misleading that there's a dinosaur on the cover, because they're not really in the dinosaur world for very long. But I liked that this story was continuing Antsy's story, and we also got some moments that I didn't expect us to see for some time in this series. Sagasa by Sophie Burnham essentially explores what if the Roman Empire had never fallen, and the main plot centers around a murder mystery, as the imperial historian is a hereditary title and has now passed to a woman in her 20s after her father has been assassinated, We've also got multiple queer characters in the story. There's a lot of social commentary and unpacking things going on. It is truly an excellent book, and I can't wait to continue the series. Word Slut by Amanda Montell is a non-fiction book about the way that specifically people that are socialized as women, the language patterns they fall into and the way that they might be criticized and stigmatized for them. I thought this was a really eye-opening book, and it really reframed how I thought about a lot of things, especially things like hedging and using the word like and Valley Girl accents. It's a lot and very, very interesting. Vampire's Handbook of History and Law of the Undead by Agnes Hollyhock. This book gives a really good overview of a lot of different vampire mythos and also links them to popular culture. I thought it was one of the more extensive books on this subject matter that I've come across, and I want to own a copy because I think it will be a useful reference book. Joe Hill's Reign is a sapphic graphic novel where on the day that they move in together, a unprecedented storm occurs and this woman's girlfriend ends up killed by, I think it's glass that rains down from the sky. So this book is, or graphic novel, is primarily looking at grief, but it's also just so gorgeous. The Many Deaths of Layla Starr by Ram V is also kind of looking at death. I can't remember her name, but I think she's like a goddess of death, but she ends up getting fired because a child has just been born who's going to uncover the secret to immortality. So it goes through many different lives that she leads, and there's just something gorgeous about the story. Fairy Tale Blankets to Crochet is just, a book of crochet patterns that I thought was really great, and I would like a copy for my personal reference. Gosh, I've got so many books on this list. He Who Bleeds by Dorian Valentine is aristocrat is in love with a priest, but turns out they are both demons, and the aristocrat is actually in a contract to do the bidding for an unknown benefactor, and basically he wants to try and find out who his benefactor is so he can kill him and be free of said contract. Forever Read by Harvey Oliver Baxter is a prequel and slightly a sequel to Fallen Thorns. It follows the inception and, the subsequent years that this band is together. Forever Red do pop up in Fallen Thorns. I don't know if I'd say they're like main characters, but they are a not insignificant part of the story. And a lot of this book is focusing on the love story between two of the characters, Benjamin and Casper. And, it was really, really good. Like, it's a terrible comp title, but like, I would comp it to the final revive of Opal and Nev or Daisy Jones and the Six. Feybound, I cannot do Feybound justice, but let me just say it is so good. Wow. Of course it's so good. It's on this list. Just pick up a copy. And we are almost at the end. 2 more books. I Am AI by Ai Zhang is set in a not too distant future where AI has very much taken over people's jobs to the point that our main character actually has to pretend that she is AI in order to get work, and it leads to some consequences on her life. But whilst it is hard hitting in places, it's also a surprisingly optimistic story. I love the way that this author writes, and I'm looking forward to reading more from her in the future. Sister Made a Monster by Lucy A. Snyder is cosmic horror that centers around a pandemic where women are disproportionately affected, whether that's because they are genuinely more predisposed to the impacts of the virus, or whether it's because men just get away with murder. It is incredibly feminist. It is weird. There's body horror aspects to it, and it just tickled all the things for me. So this has ended up being a bit of a longer video than I first anticipated. So first, let me say thank you for sticking with me, and I guess leave a comment of what book or books I've talked about in this video most intrigue you. But until next time, love you. Bye.